Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is Technique Tuesday. Starting a project at the center of a circular item knit in the round can be really tricky. There are lots of ways to do this, but these methods can be time-consuming and fiddly, particularly if you don't use them very often and have to look them up every time. So today I'm going to show you two ways you can use the familiar long-tail cast-on to start a center-out project. One of the methods gives exactly the same result as the fiddly methods, while the second one gives a result that is so close, no one will be able to tell the difference. So let's get started. So the situation we're talking about is when you need to start at the center of a circular item and you're starting with just a very small number of stitches and you have to keep increasing in order to make the item rounder. So like a circular blanket, a doily, a circular shawl, or something like a top-down hat where you're starting at the crown and you're working your way down. All of these are situations in which you might be asked to start with a cast-on like a I-cord belly button cast-on, or Emily Ocker's cast-on, or a pinhole cast-on, or I think there's one called the disappearing loop. So there are a bunch of different names and there are a bunch of different techniques, and they all get you to the same end point. So one of the methods I'm going to show you gets you to exactly the same end point as all of those other techniques. That's this one. And the other one is going to be maybe a little simpler than that. And it's going to bring you to this end point, which I think is really hard to see the difference. And then at the end, I'll explain how you can lock your tails down so that the center doesn't open up, which can sometimes happen with these sorts of beginnings or endings if you're working toward the center as well. So for this first method, you are going to need some contrast yarn. So it should be the same weight, thickness as your project yarn, and nice and smooth, so that and sufficient contrast so that you can really tell the difference between the waste yarn and your project yarn. So measure off about a 6-inch tail, 15 centimeters, and get your needle. You're going to hold the yarn tails in your right hand along with your working needle, and then you're going to set yourself up for the long tail cast on. So the waste yarn is the one that's going to be used for the thumb, and the project yarn is the one for your index finger. Get yourself set up in your slingshot like this, and now cast on however many stitches you need. Usually for center out it's 8 stitches, but sometimes it might be 6 or even 4 or just something different, but I'm going to do 8. So I'm just confirming I've got 8. I've got 8. So now I can cut that waste yarn. Don't need that anymore. And that's it for the cast on. At this point, you just start working your project. So because I am working with a long circular needle and magic loop, I would divide the stitches in half so that I would have half on each needle. But if you're working with double points, you would divide them up into your double points. So after your cast on, you might have a pattern that tells you to immediately double the number of stitches, usually using knit front back. That's the best way when you have to double the number of stitches is to use a knit front back. You might not be using that increase indefinitely, but at least for the starting. So you could do that right now. It's easier if you work around first and then go into your knit front back. So just work a plain round of knits, then do your knit front back, and then you'll alternate a plain round with an increase round using whatever kind of increase your pattern says to use or that you like to use, and you'll be increasing 8 stitches every time you do an increase round. So I'm going to do a plain round, do a knit front back, then use a different increase for the rest. And I'm going to keep doing this until I have 48 stitches so that we can show you how to finish off the center. Okay, so now it is time to thread the yarn tail through the first round of the blue stitches. So you can see when I pull on this stitch here that it's this one right here, that there is a yellow stitch right below it with that's twisted at the base. So with the long tail cast on, all of the yellow stitches are twisted. You can see them. And then right above them, there is a regular blue stitch. So we're going to thread this tail onto a yarn needle. And then we're going to go through each one of the stitches, through one leg of each of those stitches. So every stitch that you see that is above one of these yellow stitches has two legs. There's, a left leg and a right leg. So this first one right here, you can barely see the left leg, but you can see the right leg right here. So you're going to put your yarn needle through that one, and then you're going to go around all of the other ones. This is why I suggested working that first round as plain knits. If you do the first round as knit front back, these can be really tight and you have to kind of do them one at a time. So I've got 3 here, and I'm going to keep going around. Now I've got the fourth one, so I'm halfway around. So I am going to pull the yarn tail through. So now I've got the next one right here. I've got 1, and always the right leg, 2, 3, and then we do the one that where the yarn tail was hanging from at the beginning. So now we've got through these 4, so we know that we've gone through all 8 stitches. I'm going to pull through here gently. Now I'm going to remove this waste yarn. So I'm going to cut this waste yarn pretty close, and then I'm just going to pull it out. Use my yarn needle to pull these stitches out. And in this case, I probably went through one. There we go. It broke through. All right. So you can see now I've got all of these threaded through, and now I can just pull this like a drawstring. So this is just exactly the same as if I had knit from the outside toward the center and threaded this through all of those live stitches. So it looks exactly the same. Now for this second method, you just use your project yarn and you do a standard long tail cast on using the number of stitches that you need. So once again, I have 8 stitches. I am going to work in the round, adding 8 new stitches every other round until I have 48, so that I can show you how you finish off the middle. Once again, you can start with a plain round before you do your increases, but it's really not necessary in this particular case. But if you want to, you can. This is my first cast on stitch that I had right here. And you remember those twisted loops that we have all around here? Well, we can run the yarn tail through those twisted loops, similarly to how we ran them through the untwisted loops before. So I'm going to look, let's get a little closer. So this time I'm going to go in the other direction. I'm going to go around this way just because I think it's easier to thread through these loops. So I'm going to go under these, the top loop of the twist that you can see there. So I'm still going through one leg of each stitch. It's just that these stitches are twisted rather than untwisted. There we go. So now I've pulled them all through, and then I can pull them tight. So you can see these side by side now. They look exactly the same. So you can decide which process you prefer and which result. If you try these both out and you see that you get a better result with one versus the other, that's fine. If you want to finish these off, sometimes when you just go around once, these can open up. So there is a way that you can kind of lock these in. So you take your yarn tail, you go down through the center and then up across. And then you go back down through the center again. And that creates kind of a figure 8 there, and that's going to lock those stitches into the center. And you can do that the same thing over here as well. If you like this trick of using the long tail cast on as a substitute for a more fiddly cast on method, you might also like this video over here where I demonstrate how to use any standard cast on method to get started on the tubular or Italian cast on. It's especially handy when you have to cast on hundreds of stitches. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.